Hey, Thomas from Field Tennis. When you were watching me hit these forehands, you surely saw that something is not right. And this is one of the common problems that players end up in. And in today's video, I want to explain to you why does this happen and how we can correct it. So why do players end up hitting like this? So they're not fully rotated, that's one thing. And also they are in neutral stance, so they're not in open stance. So the common problem is that players are either in some way automated into stepping into neutral stance before they read the ball. So in their mind's eye, preparing for the forehand does not only mean having a unit turn, so upper body turn. This leg also is pulled together into the preparation. So they either step forward or they try to shuffle and position sideways with their feet before they read the ball. So their forehand preparation is like this, and that has been automated in some way, and now the player is not aware of that. That's one reason. The other reason is that players oftentimes falsely believe, or they've been taught too long, that neutral stance or stepping into the ball is better than open stance. And so they're a bit more aware of that, and they're trying to step into the ball as much as they can. So again, they're doing that without really reading the ball and without really feeling whether the actual result is really better. And so the cause of these problems is always that the player gets into a neutral stance before they read the ball. So a player that doesn't get in this kind of trouble, let's say a higher level player, is going to handle these high balls. So now I've set the ball machine to give me high and deep balls that jump also high. And so a skilled player is always going to handle, almost always, especially behind the baseline, with an open stance forehand, because it's much more comfortable. It's much more comfortable hitting a high ball in open stance than in neutral stance. Also deep ball or fast ball. So because neutral stance always means I'm shortening the distance to the ball. So if I'm originally here and I do a neutral stance, then I'm shortening the distance to the ball. I am cutting myself more time off, so I have less time, so the situation is already difficult, and by stepping in you're making it even more difficult. So if I see a deep ball or a fast ball approaching, then I would prefer to stay where I am to maintain at least the same distance so that I can handle the ball better. And so a skilled player always starts every forehand in open stance and then steps into neutral when necessary. So I want to give you a few shots from the back view. So if I'm first just standing here, when I see the ball coming, I just prepare for open stance, and it's relatively easy to handle balls from this situation. So these kind of balls that are coming higher, bouncing higher, have a lot of topspin. So from here I go, so even if I'm like further away, I go to this ball and I'm going to handle this ball very comfortably in open stance, rather than trying to position in neutral, and then players end up like this. So just to show you from this angle, yes, I can hit it in neutral, but the contact point has to be really well in front, and I have to make sure that I rotate through the ball. So my hip has to come through, which is most of the times problems with players. So the hip has to come through, and they hit the ball a bit late, and then the hip stays back, and the forehand is weak or it goes in the net. So when I'm playing and I'm looking on the other side, trying to see what kind of ball is going to come, obviously my split step is open stance, so I'm in split step, then I have to do a little adjustment, and I'm always in open stance. So I do a little adjustment, I can step out, and I'm in open stance just in case the ball is deep, jumping very high, and so on. So if that's the case, like this ball, that's bouncing relatively deep, it's coming high, it's bouncing high. I'm going to manage this ball much better with an open stance forehand than in neutral stance forehand. So it's much easier to play it this way. So in real tennis, I'm always playing and I'm expecting the ball to be difficult, and if the ball is not difficult, then I can step in. So that is the difference between the player who automatically positions for neutral stance before they read the ball. In terms of reading the ball, we can very quickly read direction. So when I'm playing, I can very quickly read whether it's forehand or backhand. So I react to the direction very quickly, but I need a bit more flight data to tell whether the ball is very deep or coming at a higher trajectory with a more topspin and so on. So I need a bit more data to see the ball. So I always react to the ball with the upper body, and then I'm doing necessary adjustment if I have to do it. And I'm assuming, it's subconscious, but I'm explaining to you what goes on in the mind. I am assuming the ball is difficult. So difficult means I will handle it much better in open stance. Especially if the ball is fast, if I step in too early, I'm done, I cannot correct anymore. So I'm always assuming open stance, difficult, deep ball. And then as I get more flight data along the way, then I can see, oh, this ball is actually a bit shorter, and then I will step in very naturally, because from this position it's very natural to step into neutral stance. So to show you a real situation, I will play a clip from one of my hitting sessions. I'm just hitting with my friend Urban, and you can notice how I'm constantly switching from neutral to open stance, right? So some forehands are open stance, some forehands are neutral stance, and so this is what constantly keeps going while we play, right? So now the question is, how do I decide and what's the difference, right? So this is an example of a neutral stance, and you can see the next one will be open stance. So just in a minute I will show you how they look very similar from the beginning. So if I'm assessing, so I'm always in open stance and I'm assessing the depth of the ball first. So all I can see first that it's a forehand, so I know it's a forehand. So now as I'm preparing the forehand, I'm reading the ball and I'm assessing, okay, this is a deep ball, so I'm staying in open stance. So you can see that this ball bounced quite deep, like there, he's coming into screen, so it's like in the last quarter of the court. So it's a deep ball, so I'm staying open stance, I will handle that ball better. And so on the next forehand, you can see that I'm transitioning into neutral stance. So again, I started as open. So here's like I'm starting the forehand, and now I'm reading that the ball is shorter, and then this leg will automatically come forward because I can see that I can handle this ball in neutral stance. And so this process keeps going on and on all the time. But what my point is in this video, this whole video, is that every forehand begins as open stance. And here is an example of open stance and neutral stance side by side. So if I play first the clip in normal speed, you can see that I've synchronized them and I'm hitting the ball at the same time. So you can see on the left open stance, on the right neutral stance. So again, if I play normal speed, they look like this. So now if we slow down a little bit and we go from ready position, what I want to show you that in the beginning, you cannot really tell what stance I will play. So the only difference here is that I'm kind of reading the ball very quickly on this side, on the left side, and this left foot is going back slightly. So I'm going into open stance in both cases. You can see that in this, on the right side, my foot is kind of just pivoting, stepping a bit to the side. And on the left side, I'm kind of reading this ball is deep. But if I continue like this a little bit, you can see that
basically forehands look the same. So so on the right side will be a neutral stance. I'm going to step forward into neutral stance, but right now in this stage, when I'm beginning the forehand, you can see that they're basically the same. And so only when I continue forward, then I'm reading that on the right side, I'm reading the ball is shorter, and now I'm releasing the left foot and stepping into the ball. So that's how we transition from open to neutral in almost all cases, unless it's like really, really obvious that we're getting a short ball. Okay, so I want to give you an example in slow motion and with timers. So here, what we're going to do is, I'm going to go a bit forward so that you see how much time do I actually have, right? So here's the ball bounce. So if I put a timer on to see how much time do I have from the ball bounce to me, you can see that it's less than 2/10 of a second, right? So from the bounce to me, less than 2/10 of a second. So you can see if I go a bit further back, so this was my split step, and then I realized, I see that the ball is coming to me, so you can see that basically this foot just pivots. Since the ball is coming right to me, I don't have to move. But since I see that the ball is deep, so that's my initial preparation. I'm always in open stance, like what I'm explaining in this video. And so if the ball were to be shorter and slower, then I can still step in, but I'm always prepared for the most difficult situation. So I'm in open stance, and this ball just happens to go straight to me. So at least this way, so I'm holding my ground, I'm in this position, and I'm keeping this distance to the ball. So if I were to step in closer into a neutral stance, then I would have shortened the distance to the ball, and I would have had even less time. So I already have very little time to hit the ball well, and I really don't want to step into it to have even less time, right? So here I have only even less than 2/10 of a second. So just show you one more forehand. So here's another one. So this one bounces a bit further. So again, I'm in a very similar position. So if I go a bit further back, you can see that the ball is coming straight at me, since I'm just rallying cooperatively, and sometimes the ball comes like right into my strike zone. I don't have to move. So basically all I do is that I load for the open stance, I load the leg, and then I can drive the leg up and of course rotate the body. So I'm playing open stance. So let's see, here's the ball bounce. Let me put the ball in. So ball bounce. So from the ball bounce to me, it's about 3/10 of a second. So this ball skidded a little bit, I remember. Since then I was like a little bit trying to catch it. So I have only 3/10 of a second of the ball flight from the bounce to me. So you can imagine that probably at this speed of the rally, the ball flight, so the first ball flight from my partner to the bounce was maybe a bit more than a second, and now I have 0.3 seconds, right? So very little time in reality. So again, I don't want to step forward closer to this ball, since I already have little time. And also want to mention that I'm still quite far behind the baseline, because I can feel now the speed of my friend. I'm rallying for a while, and definitely I cannot stand here on this fast ball. So I have to adjust my position. So I'm standing well behind the baseline, and even then I have very little time to position myself. So this is just another example why we always play open stance, because if the ball is really fast, then at least we are still in a good position to handle it, and just automatically stepping into the ball without reading it causes all sorts of problems.
I want to show you one more problem with the neutral stance that happens when players step into the ball too early. So if player steps into the ball too early and then they hit, so I will demonstrate a few in the wrong way. So player steps in very early and then they hit. now they have lost the weight transfer, because usually they wouldn't step like this. Like if they kept on the back foot, then they would have maintained still the weight transfer, but of course this is not the right way to do it. So what players do is they step too early, they're on this leg already, and now they have to wait for the ball many times. So they go neutral, now they wait for the ball, they wait for the ball, and they have lost the weight transfer. So weight transfer has to be timed. So that's why we are on this leg first, and we are timing when do I step in so that I get a good weight transfer in the ball, right? So as the ball is coming, toop, I want to go into the ball. So I want to go into the ball. So I have to time when is the right time to make the weight transfer. And where do I time that? Well, I time that on the outside foot. So I time that on this foot. I wait on this foot, and now is the time to go in. So here, and now is the time to go in. So in conclusion, every forehand should start as an open stance forehand. And the reason is that just in case the ball is difficult, that means very deep or high or fast, we're going to manage those balls much better in open stance than in neutral stance. And because we need a bit more time to tell the depth of the ball, but we can tell direction very early, so we react to the direction, and we are in open stance. We already were from split step. We can make little adjustments or more steps, but we are in open stance. And as we get more flight data from the ball, we recognize maybe the ball is shorter. That's when the left foot for right-handers is going to come in very naturally in. So I'm stepping in and taking the ball in neutral stance. And another reason why it's not so good to get into neutral stance very quickly is because you lose a dynamic weight transfer. So you are now in neutral stance, and now you've lost the weight because you're waiting for the ball on the front foot. So you're waiting for the ball, and you don't feel good weight transfer into the ball. And the weight transfer has to be timed to work really well. So I invite you to experiment with this approach, starting every forehand as an open stance forehand, and then transitioning to neutral when necessary. And then let me know how it works for you in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.